Another quick tie. Your next fly starts here.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another quick tie. My name is Tim Hepworth here with Fly Fishing Bow River Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying. Tonight we got an awesome quick tie for you. We are tying up the Film Critic. Super cool pattern using some very different approaches to tying in hackle and some different techniques I think you're really going to enjoy. Might look difficult at first, but just stick with the process and I think it's going to turn out just fine. I want to thank Western Canada Fly Fishing Guide School for sponsoring this quick tie for you tonight. You can see the information below there, our website, the dates, May 5th to 10 this spring. If you have any questions about guide school or any interest or just want to inquire more information, just go ahead over to the website. Lots of information there, or reach out to us directly and we're happy to answer any questions you may have about it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video. Drop us a comment. If you're new to us tonight, you've never seen any of our videos, let us know how it goes. If you're tying along, let us know how the fly goes and how you found us. We always love to hear when new people are dropping in. For myself tonight, I'm going to be tying out of our Thursday Night Live Season 7, Episode 3 kit. So it's going to look, your kit looks something like this. Season 7, and then you're going to want to go ahead over and grab your, flip that around, your Episode 3. If you're tying out of our individual kits as well, no problem at all. Materials are going to be the same. The packaging is going to look a little different. And if you aren't tying out of any of our materials, that's awesome. No problem. We do have a fly recipe over at our website. Just go to the Thursday Night Live tab and you're going to find under Season 7, Episode 3, you'll see a full recipe for this fly. And if you've got all the materials, take a stab at it with us. All right, let's head over to the vise and see what we have to work with. So this fly, we're tying it a little bigger than it classically would be tied in this color. We're kind of going with the bluing olive motif and colors. This is a mayfly. It is a mayfly that's attempting to get out of its shuck and is, as it says, a film critic. It should be stuck in the film. This is what you might call an emerger or possibly a cripple, depending how you view it. But that's the whole point of this fly, is to make it look kind of grungy. So it's not actually supposed to look super awesome through the whole thing. The point is how this specific technique works in fly tying is to make them look rough, float well, and look like a bug that's in trouble when they're most vulnerable and trout are gonna eat them a lot. Okay, a little bit of stuff on the fly there. Let's get this out of the vise, get the next hook in your vise. We're gonna be tying this in a size 14 tonight. So it'd be a little bit big for a bluing, but any color variation of this fly is very appropriate, as it's just a mayfly pattern. Obviously, we have a lot of different colored mayflies out there. I will say we're gonna orient this hook a few different times in the vise, a little different angles, because at times we need to be working into different spaces on the hook itself. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually tip it down a little bit, so I've got some access into the rear bend, because as you saw there, we're taking material right down around the bend of the hook. For thread tonight, I'm using some UTC 70 in black. Thread color is not really going to matter on this one, as it's going to be all covered by the material pretty much the entire time. So I'm going to go with the black and something a little smaller so we're not overdoing it with the thread on the hook shank itself. So to start off here, I'm going to start my thread at about the midway point on the hook shank. Take a few thread wraps down. Going to come in here and trim out my tag end. And then I'm going to take some thread wraps right down around the bend. A lot of times we say don't go around the bend, but this time we are going to. We're going to take it down around the bend a ways. And now we're going to go ahead and grab our first material, and that's going to be a mallard flank feather. Okay, it's going to look just like this. And now all we're going to do is we're going to be grabbing a dozen or so fibers off of the stem of this feather. We're not using the whole thing. You'll be able to get multiple flies out of this as far as the tail is concerned. I'm just going to get that fluff out of the way at the bottom of the feather, so I'm going to peel some of those down and get rid of them. So it gives me good access to those nice barred mallard flank pieces. So I'm gonna come and grab roughly a dozen or so fibers, separate them away from the stem like so, and I'm just gonna tear them off the stem. Trying to kind of keep everything aligned so the tips of them stay aligned together. Now we want this tail to be roughly half of that hook shank in length out the back of the hook. This is going to be tipped down, so as I tie these in, they're probably going to go out of sight into the vise, but we are adding a piece of shuck to the tail as well. So it's important that we have a decent length out the back, but we don't want this to be a super long tail. But you kind of gauge it by bending it down around the hook bend and seeing where it's going to land, because you obviously the thread wraps are going to take it around the corner a little ways. So I'm gonna try to get that roughly half of the hook shank. I'm gonna change hands. I'm gonna tie this in right onto the top of the hook shank up here. And then from there, I'm gonna take some thread wraps rearward to lock it in as I go back down the feather or back down the hook shank. So I've tied it in up high, and I'm just gonna kind of prop it up with my fingers and start taking some thread wraps back down to where I left my thread. Trying to organize that whole tail together. I'm gonna leave it roughly right there. I'm gonna take my thread back up a little ways, and I can trim out those butt ends. The underside of this body is gonna get covered with dubbing, so we're not super worried about, you know, leaving materials partway up the hook or anything like that, as we're basing this fly with some dubbing, so it's not gonna be an issue. Now to create the shuck of this fly, you've got some orange colored Antron. Zelon will work just as well here. I'm gonna take and find one tip end, and I'm gonna cut it off even. So I've got a nice square end, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and cut myself about 2 inches off to work with. And then we're gonna come in here. And I'm gonna tie this in right up on top of the hook shank again. I'm just kind of rolling it in my fingers to get those pieces of the fiber to kind of align themselves together. I'm gonna come right up on top here. I'm gonna give my bobbin a little spin so it jumps rearward with my thread. And then I'm just gonna pull those tag ends down a little ways, and then I'm gonna lock in those butts right away so it doesn't sneak out on me. And now I'm just gonna be taking this down right to the same tie-in point that I left my tail. So I'm just kind of, you see me lifting up and checking where I'm leaving it. I'm happy with it right there. And now I want this to be about 1/4 of the overall tail length. So we're not leaving a big long trailing shuck. We're just leaving a little piece of shuck that's gonna sit up on top of those tail fibers. So I'm not going super crazy with my length here. I'm gonna trim that out just like that. You can set that aside, that piece you just cut out, and use it on the next fly. Now the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna be counter wrapping some wire up this fly. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my size small copper wire that's in your kit. Grab yourself a length of it, and we're gonna tie this in. Right here, I'm gonna tie it on the near side of the fly. Gonna lock that down. Cover up the butt end of that wire with my thread, and then take it rearward, right to where I left my tail and everything else I tied in back here. And that's right where I'm gonna leave my thread for now. Now I'm gonna go over to my dubbing, and you've got enough dubbing in your kit here to do about 1,000 of these guys. This is a dry fly dubbing. It's very light and kind of wispy, easy to make a dubbing noodle out of, which is what we're gonna be doing on our thread. And a dubbing noodle just means I'm taking that dubbing, I'm placing my fingers and just rolling it on my thread, essentially roping it up. And I'm gonna do maybe 1.5 inches long worth of dubbing on here. And you wanna keep it pretty sparse. You don't wanna go super crazy. You can see the fibers on this dubbing are very short, so they actually go on really nice as far as dubbing noodle is concerned. I often just hold a clump in my dominant hand, and with my non-dominant hand that's gonna be applying it to the thread, I'm just gonna go and start adding it, pulling off of the clump that's in my other hand. And we're gonna want a fairly even underbody. Do your best when you're applying it to kind of create an even kind of thickness to the rope. Doesn't always work out perfect, but that's okay. You can always add some, and you can always take some off. So that's not the end of the world. So now that I've got that roped up, you could use some dubbing wax as well, would help that rope up nicely, but it works pretty good with just your fingers on this dubbing. I'm gonna start right back by my shuck, and I'm gonna start wrapping forward, making sure I get some full coverage on the wraps, and start moving forward. And if I feel like that dubbing is loosened up a bit, I'll just spin it again and just keep going. Sometimes I need to spin it to tighten it as I wrap it. The goal is we're just trying to keep a fairly even underbody, and then we're also adding that wire back over top, and it's gonna kind of cinch down on it as well. Now, the really important part on this fly is leaving yourself lots of space here at the head, because we have a fairly complicated hackle stacking technique that's gonna require some space. So as far as I've gone here, I'm gonna give one more wrap, and then I'm gonna pull the rest of that dubbing right off the thread, which works pretty good with this. And then I'm just gonna take a few more thread wraps right there. That's gonna be kind of my marking point. Now, once I get my wire wrapped up and tied off, I'm gonna reorientate my hook so it's more level in the vise. But for right now, I'm just gonna go ahead, grab that wire, and we're gonna start wrapping Nice, even, open spiral, trying to keep the spacing as even as possible. It's more for your eye and its aesthetic, more than the fish's. And once I get up to the top here, I'm gonna come in with my thread, wrap behind, wrap in front, lock that wire down. We got that nice size small wire, so we can just grab it, spin it like in a helicopter motion, and it should just pop right off. We're gonna set that aside. Now this is where the true fun begins. We're gonna get into some fun materials here and some fun techniques. Now we're gonna kind of lose sight of our tail here because I'm gonna tip this back up, but you can see here if I pull this out, that's what we want our tail to look like. You see how that extended, the shuck's hanging off. But now I need to get a little bit more access to the front of the hook. So when I place this back in, I want the eye to be more vertical. I might go even a little bit more. Makes it a little bit easier to work with as we go through this next portion. So the next material we're gonna be tying in here is going to be, we have some white Antron yarn. Looks like this. Yeah. Now we're gonna leave a full chunk of this. And now you can see you have a very long piece. I would say cut that in half, but don't go any shorter than that. As this style of tying in and wrapping this hackle up this Antron, we need a nice long piece. So how I'm gonna initially tie this in is I wanna square off that end, which I've got fairly square at the moment. I'm gonna tie it in, I'm gonna lock my butt ends down, and then we're gonna move into wrapping the hackle after that. So what I'm gonna start with is right about here. I'm gonna leave it a little bit long, get a good wrap over top, a few wraps rearward, because I want that to butt right up against that dubbing. And I'm gonna pull some of that slack out of there so I can pull that back. And then I'm gonna take a couple more wraps so it's right up against the dubbing itself. And we're gonna add some more dubbing before we finish this fly, so it's not super critical, but and I'm just gonna do a little trim, just again, trying to keep some of this away from the eye, keeping some of that bulk away. And then I'm just gonna secure down the butt ends of that. Take this back up like this. Now what I am gonna do, and it kind of helps the post stand up a little bit, is I'm gonna take a couple of wraps behind the post, like that, and that's gonna help that post stand more vertical off the hook shank itself. Okay, now we've got our yarn in. Now we're gonna go over to our hackle. So you're gonna have a nice white gray colored hackle in here, nice long one. I suggest you leave it long. As it gets shorter, it gets more difficult to tie or to wrap up the stem. So as you tie more of these flies off this, it's gonna get a little tougher, but the first couple aren't too bad. You've got an underside to the feather. It's tough on these small feathers to really see, but you'll see there's a concave side, which is this underside, and the shinier side is the top side. Normally when we do, like let's say on a clink hammer or any post work, we would actually want the underside to be pointed up, but on this specific pattern, we're actually gonna tie it in reverse. We want the underside pointed down on the near side of the fly where I'm gonna tie this in. You'll see why when we kind of start to make our moves up this yarn with this hackle. But I'm gonna show you a little technique here when tying this stuff in. So I want you to come down to the base, and a lot of people, and I was guilty of this for a long time too, I would just grab those fibers right there and I would just rip them right off and I would just tie in the stem. But something that can help this really bind well is come in here and trim those pieces. And what it does is it leaves those little barbs. Maybe I'll show it against my hand so you can see better. So those little barbs are actually super helpful in securing this with your thread when you put it on the hook shank itself. So a great tip is just trim those off like that, and when you go to tie it in, you tie your thread through those barbs and it's gonna hold really nice. All right. So this time, like I said, we're gonna go with the underside pointed down. I'm gonna tie it in on the near side of the fly here, kind of encompassing that stem and those little barbs we left. Do a couple of wraps. Get this locked in. Now I'm gonna do a quick half hitch here, which is just a little save button on my work, little overhand granny knot. So I can also get my thread out of the way. I have a bobbin cradle over, just out of view of the camera, and that's gonna help keep my thread out of the way while I'm doing this next part. Now, stick with me on this, guys. This is the most complicated piece, and it won't seem so bad once we get into this. But the one thing I'm gonna give you advice on in this fly is it's not supposed to look good, okay? We normally have a nice firm post we're wrapping up. This isn't that. We're trying to do some nice wraps up, and then we're gonna come back down and wrap over top of our wraps again. It's gonna be fibers everywhere, and that's the point. Don't stress about it, that's how it's supposed to look, okay? Now, when we first do this, I need to take note of a few measurements. So I'm only gonna wrap hackle up as high as if I bend this over to just behind the eye. So I basically got this like 1/4 inch that I'm gonna be wrapping hackle up, and you're gonna see me do it. I'm gonna constantly lean it over and check, because we don't want more hackle than the distance from where we're tied in to the back of the hook eye itself, okay? So there's a few different ways to do this. I'm just gonna kind of hold my hand up here and grip on with my pinky and my ring finger onto the yarn itself. And then I'm gonna go ahead and grab my hackle with my other hand, and I'm gonna be assisting again with the hand that's holding the yarn. And I'm just gonna start wrapping. Okay, so I'm just using my fingers to assist. Like I said, don't geek out on how good this looks. Just start wrapping that hackle up the stem. And we're really trying to just get a lot of fibers in here. And it doesn't matter if it kind of looks loose, pull your stem back down. Just don't pull so hard that it wants to break on you. But this is what I meant by checking. So I'm gonna lean this over. That's about all I can do. That's about as high as I can go on the stem. So all I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna add a few more wraps back down. Just trying to create more and more bugginess. I'm gonna check it again. Yeah, that's good. And I like the amount here. I'm gonna go one more wrap just cause. And now what I wanna do is, again, I know your hands are doing a lot of things here, but I'm gonna hold this back and rearward, the yarn itself. I'm gonna try to pull all those fibers back, and while holding the stem with my other finger, you can see right here, I'm gonna secure that stem right there. So I'm gonna bring my thread back in. I'm gonna get my thread right up against where that hackle comes down. I'm gonna come up over top, and I'm gonna lock it in right there. Like I said, not super pretty, not the prettiest way to lock down your hackle at the end of wrapping up a post, but it doesn't matter. That's not the point of this. So get a couple wraps, secure that down. I'm gonna pull up on the feather, take a couple wraps in front, just like that, okay? So this is what I should be left with. I've got this stem that's now had a feather wrapped up and back down. It's secured to my hook shank. I'm gonna come in here and trim out that feather, set it aside for the next one. If you got any little bit of extras in here, go ahead and get them out of the way. Now, while this is back over here, I'm gonna use my material clip to kind of hold back on that. I'm gonna go back to my dubbing. And now I'm gonna take some dubbing and I'm gonna bring it right forward to behind the eye. It's gonna take about 1/4 as much as it did on the back end. So you don't need a whole ton. I'm gonna make another short little dubbing noodle here. And this is gonna be the thorax of the fly. So we're gonna add a little bit of bulk in it. And it's okay that it looks a little bulky up at the top here, because that's, if you ever seen a mayfly, the front portion of their body is gonna be bigger and wider than the back end. I'm just kind of covering up any of that stuff that I've done in there. I want to make sure that I get wraps right back against that hackle and then take it forward. I'm going to go just a smidge more dubbing so I get right behind the eye. And again, just spinning that in one direction to get that dubbing to stay on there. You don't want to go back and forth with your fingers. Again, just kind of trying to keep the hackle back out of the way. And there we go, really like that. That looks good. Nice bulky looking thorax. Now, really the last thing we have to do is to pull this hackle forward. So none of this hackle is gonna be on the bottom side of this fly. But what I wanna do as I pull this forward, I'm gonna show you a little technique here. I wanna pull those fibers back as I lay this antron down. And I'm gonna give myself almost a little bubble. I'm sorry if I'm blocking this with my fingers, but I'll try to move my fingers and imitate what it's gonna look like. I'm leaving a little bubble when I tie this in against here. Okay, this is too much of a bubble, but this is essentially what I'm doing with my fingers. And then once I get a couple thread wraps, I'm gonna pull this down and I'm gonna tighten it and stand up that hackle like that. Okay, so again, I'm gonna pull rearward with those, all that hackle. I'm gonna leave myself a little bubble that I'm pulling back on here. I'm gonna come in here with my thread, get a gathering wrap right behind the eye, get a second one, and now I'm not letting tension off of my thread hand. I'm keeping lots of tension. And now you can see I've got this bubble sitting up here, but while holding tension on my thread, I'm slowly gonna pull here and watch that hackle stand up. Just like that, till I get it tight. It's pulled down nice and firm. Now don't go and cut that antron out on us, because that is still part of the fly. We're gonna use that here in a second. I'm gonna drive a couple of thread wraps in front of the material. Good. And now from here, I'm gonna come in and I'm going to whip finish or half hitch finish the fly. I'm gonna use my half hitch tool. I'm gonna do a couple of turns over the eye. I'm gonna put a little bit of resin on this as well here in a moment. Just like so. Now I'm gonna come in here and trim out my thread. Now, we want to leave a piece of this antron yarn up here. I'm gonna cut it off just shy of the height of the hackle that's standing up. So but this hackle I'm gonna start to mash down as well. So I wanna kind of mash it and push it. We want it to sit kind of about flat with the fly and spread out. That's what's gonna give it a lot of floatability in the water. Just gonna tighten up the vise a little bit. And then I'm gonna come in here and cut at a shallow angle, just like that. Now, of course, the color of my shirt is the absolute worst for this one, but that's what I want this to look like. And from the top, you can see I'm just taking my fingers and mashing down that hackle. Like I said, it's not meant to look super pretty. It's meant to fish well. And this is a crippled fly. It's a fly that's slowly emerging, and it's just about to the top. There you go. Dana gave me some. I could see a little better. This fly is meant to just ride high. That's the beauty of this pattern. The hackle, none of it's wrapped around the stem. It's all up on top of the fly, and it's gonna give you this really floatable looking fly that's emerging. It's the Film Critic. It's stuck in the film, and that's what we're hoping to accomplish out of this pattern. All right, guys, I hope that turned out something like that for you as well. Hopefully that wasn't too intimidating. I know there were some new tips and tricks. If you're new to that hackle stacking technique, it's one to keep in the arsenal because it can be applied to a lot of different bugs, and it's a very neat way. A lot of terrestrials, ants, beetles get tied with the same idea, and it's just a great way to keep more hackle up on top of the fly and keeping your bugs floating when you need them to. Okay, guys, this has been the Film Critic. Again, my name here is Tim Hepworth, here with Fly Fishing Board Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying. And thank you again for tuning in tonight. Don't forget to leave a comment, like and subscribe to this video. All that goes a long way and helping more people see and get some reach with these videos. Okay, thank you so much. Until next time.
Cheesy.
Cheesy. Oh, he does this to me every time. Okay, what's the cheesy one gonna be this time? Cheesy outline. Okay, this is hard. It's hard to even read because it's so bad. All right, keep your hook sharp, your thread tight, and your patterns precise. That's it. That's all I got.